What is up, guys? Back at it again with your quarantine content. So today we're going to be looking at a computer that y'all haven't seen in almost 8 years. This is one of my very first computers, the Dell OptiPlex GX110. Now, I decided to start messing with this thing again just because, again, I'm sitting here bored. I had not made a video on it in a long time, so I figured I'd give you guys a little update. So, here she is. I still have this thing, man. I got this computer back in 2008, and my dad got it couple years earlier than that, and it was passed down to me from him. But anyhow, this computer is very special and near and dear to my heart because this was the first computer I ever experienced Windows XP on, and also the internet as a whole. The computer I had before this was never hooked up to the internet, ran Windows 98, it was a few years older, and so this thing really, I spent a lot of time on this thing as a kid. And so anyways, I decided to start messing with it the other day, and I have this OptiPlex, that's my OptiPlex 9020, and that's the main thing that's hooked up to this setup. But I always wanted to have this thing hooked up and ready to go just because, it's sentimental value to me and whatnot. But this Dell widescreen monitor that I was using here was too high resolution for this computer to support. Now, of course, this is a Pentium 3 based system. We'll get into the specs and everything, but basically the integrated GPU in this was not able to support the 1680 by 1050 resolution in this thing. And so that got me thinking, and I started looking through my old hardware piles and stuff, and I found a graphics card that works perfectly in this thing. Figured I'd take the top off before I continue. I found a graphics card that not only supports the proper resolution, but was also age appropriate for the machine and fits in here perfectly. And that would be, it's kind of hard to see because there's a USB card on top of it, but that card down there is an NVIDIA GeForce 2 MX100. Now that card came out in 2000. This computer came out in about 2001. Matter of fact, you can see the date code is right there. This computer was made in 2001. I went ahead and threw that in, and after a little bit of tinkering and then installing some drivers, she works perfectly, but it can support this resolution and beyond, which is nice. But other than that, this is a Pentium 3 based system, as you might be able to tell right there. I actually had to super glue that sticker back on, but she's on there good now. Pentium 3 based system. It's an 800 megahertz Pentium 3. We have 256 megabytes of PC100 RAM, I believe. Yeah, it's an 810E chipset, as you might be able to see there. Pretty old stuff, but everything is original in this thing. The hard drive is original. It is a 20 gigabyte Western Digital Caviar drive. It's dated 2001. It's running Windows XP Service Pack 1, which we'll take a look at in a second. These things were, of course, it's a Dell OptiPlex, and so they've always been pretty easy to work on. All you have to do to take these top two drives out is just unlatch these two covers right here. This comes out, and everything else is pretty easy to get to. You can pretty much disassemble this entire thing with a Phillips screwdriver, which is great. It did take a little bit of fidgeting to get this graphics card to work. When I initially put it in there, it wouldn't boot and all this stuff, and I ended up figuring out that somewhere along the way one of these RAM sticks was bad, so I ended up swapping it out. I did have a 256 megabyte stick that I tried to stick in here, but it did not like it. It would not boot with it, unfortunately, which is kind of weird because I know this thing supports up to 512 megs of RAM. It only has 256 currently, obviously, but that was the biggest stick I had, so I was kind of bummed that it didn't work. But I was able to find another 128 stick, so I can still have 256, because again, one of them went bad. But again, you can see right here, February 2001, IDE drives, all the old stuff here. So yeah, pretty cool. I figured I'd take a look at the inside real quick. Now we'll boot it up. Alright, now she's back in a little hole, we can go ahead and turn her on. You can hear those old bearings in that hard drive. They've always been that loud. So here she is booting up. I ended up giving the entire outer case an alcohol bath, so that's why it looks a little bit cleaner than it may have in the past. Kind of nice. Again, I super glued that Pentium 3 sticker back on. It's seen better days, but it's the only one I have, so I figured I'd stick her back on there. And yeah, she's not looking too bad for a 20-year-old computer. Again, like I said, I got this thing in about 2008. My dad handed it down to me, so I've had this thing for a long time. And again, this thing was one of my first experiences with both Windows XP and the internet as a whole. A lot of time was spent on here when I was a kid. So I was about 10 years old at the time, and so pretty near and dear to my heart this thing is. But go ahead and boot her up. Like I said previously, this thing is running Windows XP Service Pack 1 because I found that I found that the Service Pack 2 and 3 I ended up loading on here a while ago, like quite a while ago. We're talking like 10 years ago. And I found that it ran really crappily. So I ended up putting Service Pack 1 back on it, and it seems to run fine with that. Obviously, you know, Windows XP Service Pack 1 is a little bit less stable and doesn't have, you know, a bunch of security updates or whatnot, but this computer hasn't been connected to the internet in several years. And you may notice that I ended up not having an Ethernet card in there. It has built-in Ethernet, but I ended up having to disable it due to an IRQ conflict with the graphics card, and so we have no network adapters in this thing, basically. And because I had to have that USB card in there too, because this thing only has USB 1.1. So anyways, no internet connection, doesn't really need it, but this thing still has all of my original stuff on it. This install is from 2010. I believe the very first video I have on this channel was a little bit before I even installed this, but yeah, like I said, there you go, Pentium 3, 800 megahertz, 256 megs of RAM, and I actually ended up doing the OEM info mod, and so I have all of the original system information and stuff, service tag and whatnot. Pretty cool. Again, like I said, a lot of games like pinball and stuff were played on here back in the day. I have Windows Media Player 10 installed, which basically has a very small amount of my current music on it, but I mean, this is the kind of stuff I was listening to back in the day. And so yeah, like I said, a lot of stuff on here. Anyways, moving on, again, we have older programs like Adobe Reader 6.0 on here, Mozilla Firefox, which again, this thing does not connect to the internet lately at all. That's pretty much it. I mean, there's more files and stuff on here, but you know, it's kind of personal, so I don't really want to show it. But as you can see, we can go ahead and take a look at that graphics card. So this thing is now capable of supporting the monitor's resolution. I ended up having to disable the Intel integrated one because when I first booted this thing up, it acted like it had two displays, and I guess it was trying to display video out both monitors, and that just brought everything to a grinding halt. So I ended up having to delete or disable the Intel graphics, but no big deal there. Finding the driver for this thing actually was a little bit easier than I thought. You know, this graphics card here came out in 2000, so I figured finding the graphics driver for it was going to be a little bit more difficult than it actually was. But not much else I can say. Again, like there's more stuff on here, but it's kind of personal, and so and yeah, it's XP Service Pack 1, so it kind of does that sometimes. The way we fix that is we just open a window and then go like that, and oh, never mind, it's actually frozen this time. Alright, anyhow, yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all I can say. This thing is still chooching along almost 20 years later after it was built, and again, I've had it for at least 12, 13 years of those, and so yeah, that's just a little bit of an update video on the Dell OptiPlex GX110. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one.